Chicken McNuggets, or small fries. Any two for just $2.50.
Tonight, breaking news from Washington. The fallout. New reaction coming in after fired FBI Director James Comey testifies before the American people about his meetings with President Trump. What he says about the president and the White House.
Those were lies, plain and simple.
And tonight, Comey on the president's alleged request in the middle of the Michael Flynn investigation. The moment he says the president asked everyone in the Oval Office to leave the room. And on the president's threat that there could be tapes.
Lordy, I hope there are tapes.
Also tonight, firing back. The White House saying the president is not a liar. And the president's personal lawyer attacking Comey for leaking details from their meetings. Comey tonight admitting it. Also this evening, the terror investigation, the new surveillance just released. The moment the gunmen unleashed their attack. The outrage tonight, prosecutors say police beating a man who was simply a bystander and not the driver they'd been pursuing. And America Strong, the boy, the flag, and his words when no one was looking.
This is a special edition of ABC World News Tonight with David Muir, reporting tonight from Washington.
And good evening from Washington, and we begin with the blockbuster testimony on Capitol Hill, the most anticipated hearing in many years here. Fired FBI Director James Comey and his stunning claims. It's now his word against the president's. Under oath, Comey revealed he began taking notes after the very first meeting with then-President-elect Donald Trump, saying he took those notes because he feared Trump could later lie about their meeting. He then kept notes on the meetings that would follow. He described their dinner at the White House and the other meeting in the Oval Office when the president asked everyone else to leave the room, and the request about retired General Michael Flynn that followed. We begin with ABC senior justice correspondent Pierre Thomas leading us off.
Today, with the eyes of the nation upon him, former FBI Director James Comey emerged from seclusion to tell his story.
Director Comey, you're now under oath.
In his first public appearance since being fired by President Trump, Comey describes his reaction to his abrupt dismissal.
The shifting explanations confused me and increasingly concerned me. He had repeatedly told me I was doing a great job and he hoped I would stay.
Comey accused the White House of smearing his name.
The administration then chose to defame me and, more importantly, the FBI by saying that the organization was in disarray, that it was poorly led, that the workforce had lost confidence in its leader. Those were lies, plain and simple.
Comey describes his growing unease with the president, starting with their first one-on-one meeting at Trump Tower. As soon as it was over, Comey got into his FBI vehicle parked outside and began taking notes on his laptop.
What was it about that meeting that led you to determine that you needed to start putting down a written record?
A combination of things. I think the circumstances, the subject matter, and the person I was interacting with. I was honestly concerned that he might lie about the nature of our meeting, and so I thought it really important to document.
From Comey's perspective, his one-on-one interactions with the president only grew more troublesome.
Oh, and there's James. Will you please? He's become more famous than me.
You've seen the picture of me walking across the Blue Room, and what the president whispered in my ear was, "I really look forward to working with you."
1 week after the inauguration, a private dinner at the White House, the president has said before that Comey wanted it.
A dinner was arranged. I think he asked for the dinner.
Did you in any way initiate that dinner?
No. He called me at my lunchtime and asked me, was I free for dinner that night? And he said, how about 6:30? And I said, whatever works for you, sir. And then I hung up and had to call my wife and break a date with her. I was supposed to take her out to dinner that night.
That's one of the all-time great excuses for breaking a date.
Yeah. In retrospect, I love spending time with my wife. I wish I'd been there that night.
It was at that dinner that Comey claims the president told him, "I need loyalty. I expect loyalty." Comey said he promised only to be honest. The president said, honest loyalty, that's where they left it. And then what was to Comey the most disturbing interaction of all, a February 14th meeting in the Oval Office with Comey, the president, and his top advisors. At the end, the president tells Comey to stay, ordering everyone else out of the room, including Attorney General Jeff Sessions and Jared Kushner.
My impression was something big is about to happen. I need to remember every single word that is spoken. My sense was the Attorney General knew he shouldn't be leaving, which is why he was lingering, and I don't know Mr. Kushner well, but I think he picked up on the same thing. And so I knew something was about to happen that I needed to pay very close attention to.
When they were alone, Comey claims the president asked him to back off the investigation into fired National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, saying he is a good guy and has been through a lot. I hope you can let this go. Senators on both sides asked about that wording. The president saying, I hope you can let this go.
I took it as a direction. Right. I mean, this is the president of the United States with me alone saying, I hope this. I took it as this is what he wants me to do. Now, I didn't obey that, but that's the way I took it.
But why didn't you stop and say, Mr. President, this is wrong. I cannot discuss this with you?
It's a great question. Maybe if I were stronger, I would have. I was so stunned by the conversation that I just took it in. Look, I've seen the tweet about tapes. Lordy, I hope there are tapes.
3 months later, Comey was fired. He says he quickly wanted to get his side of the story out, and he planned to use those detailed memos of his one-on-one conversations with Trump.
I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel.
Do you believe this will rise to the obstruction of justice?
I don't know. That's Bob Mueller's job to sort that out.
But there's no question in Comey's mind about one thing, why he lost his job.
You're summarily fired without any explanation or anything else.
Well, there was an explanation. I just don't buy it. It's my judgment that I was fired because of the Russia investigation. I was fired in some way to change, or the endeavor was to change the way the Russia investigation was being conducted. That is a very big deal.
Pierre Thomas with us live here at the Capitol tonight. And Pierre, James Comey revealed today that he has given those memos now, those notes about his private meetings with the president over to special counsel Robert Mueller. Does that mean Mueller is now investigating the nature of those meetings?
David, all we know is that Mueller has the memos and is assessing them. But Comey was truly trying to make the case that Mueller should investigate the circumstances of the encounters with the president to determine if a crime was committed. David?
Pierre Thomas leading us off tonight. Pierre, thank you. President Trump was watching much of James Comey's testimony from his personal dining room not far from the Oval Office today, his team declaring victory, saying Comey acknowledged what the president has said all along, that Comey told him he is not under investigation personally. The White House today saying the president is not a liar. You'll remember the president once threatened in a tweet there could be tapes. And after Comey today said if there are tapes, he welcomes them, the White House was then asked, do they exist? ABC's chief White House correspondent Jonathan Karl tonight.
Donald J. Trump.
Toward the end of Comey's testimony, the president took the stage at an event with Christian conservatives. No mention of Comey, but he did level some of the same charges at his political opponents as they level at him.
They will lie, they will obstruct, they will spread their hatred and their prejudice. But we will not back down from doing what is right.
Later at the White House, we tried to ask him about the big hearing.
Mr. President, any reaction to Comey's testimony?
Thank you very much.
Any reaction at all? Sir? Do you think he told the truth to the Senate?
But while the president was mum, his personal lawyer, Mark Kasowitz, was not.
Mr. Comey has now finally confirmed publicly what he repeatedly told President Trump privately. That is, that the president was not under investigation as part of any probe into Russian interference.
It's something the president had been asking Comey to say publicly for months. Today, he finally did.
The president of the United States was not under investigation. Is that a fair statement?
That's correct.
All right. So that's a fact that we can rely on at this
Yes, sir.
point. Okay.
Although Comey could not say whether or not the president is now under investigation or will be. And Kasowitz hotly disputed almost everything else Comey had to say, effectively accusing him of lying about his conversations with the president.
The president never suggested that Mr. Comey, quote, let Flynn go, close quote. The president also never told Mr. Comey, quote, I need loyalty. I expect loyalty, close quote. He never said it in form, and he never said it in substance.
Kasowitz also keyed in on Comey's admission that he asked a friend to leak the memos he wrote about his conversations to the New York Times.
Mr. Comey has now admitted that he is one of these leakers.
About a month ago, the president suggested there might be tapes of his conversations with Comey, tapes which would show definitively who is telling the truth.
The president surely knows whether he taped me, and if he did, my feelings aren't hurt. Release all the tapes. I'm good with it.
Gotcha.
Jonathan Karl joins us across town from the White House tonight. And John, back to that threat, the president's tweet saying James Comey better hope there are no tapes. Tonight, we know Comey's memos have now been turned over to the special counsel. Is there pressure there at the White House to do the same with these tapes if they exist?
Well, there certainly is pressure to at least answer definitively the question whether or not the president taped his conversations. That was a question that came up at today's White House briefing. The answer from the deputy press secretary was, I have no idea. It's a question that she and Sean Spicer and others here will get over and over again in the coming days.
John Karl at the White House tonight. John, our thanks to you. We have two more legal questions tonight. They're major, one about the president and one about James Comey as well. I want to bring in ABC's chief legal analyst, Dan Abrams. And Dan, on this issue of Michael Flynn, the alleged request we heard about in the Oval Office, the president allegedly saying to Comey, I hope you can let it go. We saw earlier there, Comey pressed on that today, the president saying, I hope and not I order you to let it go. Here was the moment that Comey was pressed on that point where he actually says, yes, I took it as an order. How do you take it, Dan?
Well, look, I think that the way that James Comey took it is fairly clear. He took it as a directive, an order from the president, and it's an order that he said that he would ignore. So why didn't he do something about it? He said he didn't want to derail the Russia investigation. But also, it was a bit of a bombshell. Claimed they specifically left open the possibility of investigating the president himself for that comment down the road.
And Dan, on this notion of James Comey leaking his own memos, his own notes, he was hoping an independent counsel would be appointed. He said that here today, and it then happened. But the White House now targeting Comey about the leak. Does he face anything for this?
Well, he'll certainly face criticism from some who'll say, what was he doing secretly leaking through a friend to the New York Times? But legally, it's not a crime if it wasn't classified. And Comey made it clear today he specifically wrote these memos in a way that they would be unclassified in case he ended up in this exact situation in front of this exact committee. David?
Dan Abrams with us tonight from New York. Dan, thank you. Here on Capitol Hill, reaction pouring in at this hour. Senators on both sides who say after Comey's testimony, they're now demanding answers from President Trump. Here's ABC's Mary Bruce.
James Comey walking away from his explosive testimony confident and stone-faced.
Mr. Comey, the president and the White House say that your testimony vindicated the president.
In his wake, lawmakers retreating to their partisan corners. Democrats saying they heard evidence the president tried to torpedo the Russia investigation.
I'm not a criminal lawyer, but that certainly sounds like obstruction of justice to me.
But Republicans disagree.
Did you see any evidence of that?
I didn't see. And Comey, I think, was very, very careful today to say there were awkward conversations. There were conversations that were uncomfortable. There were conversations that were inappropriate. All those terms were used, but there was never anything that was a legal term that he ever used.
Defending those interactions, the Speaker of the House.
The president's new at this. He's new to government. And so he probably wasn't steeped in the long-running protocols.
Tonight, one thing both parties can agree on, this is far from over.
This is nowhere near the end of our investigation.
And Mary Bruce with us live here tonight on Capitol Hill. And Mary, on the issue of these tapes, has Congress yet tried to subpoena or request these tapes, especially given the fact that they heard so much about the memos? They'll want to hear the other side of the story now.
David, at least one committee has already asked for any tapes, but the White House has said that they need more time to respond to their request. If any tapes do exist, lawmakers here are going to want to hear them, especially after Comey's testimony here today.
But they say they need more time to respond, yes or no, whether the tapes even exist.
Exactly. The White House has said they need simply more time just to respond to the initial request.
Mary Bruce with us. Great to be by your side tonight, Mary. We continue here on this issue, and you heard James Comey say he is convinced he was fired because of the Russia investigation. Comey said the way he was handling it was irritating to the president and putting pressure on him. So what is the bottom line on Russian meddling? Should Americans be worried? And did President Trump ever ask James Comey what more could be done to protect Americans from Russian meddling? Listen to this.
Do you have any doubt that Russia attempted to interfere in the 2016 elections?
None.
Do you have any doubt that the Russian government was behind the cyber intrusion into state voter files?
No.
Do you have any doubt that officials of the Russian government were fully aware of these activities?
No doubt.
Did the president, in any of those interactions that you've shared with us today, ask you what you should be doing or what our government should be doing or the intelligence community to protect America against Russian interference in our election system?
I don't recall a conversation like that.
Never.
No.
So let's get to our chief investigative correspondent, Brian Ross, tonight. Brian, James Comey said today he does not recall the president ever asking him in these one-on-one conversations what the government should do to protect the U.S. against Russian interference. How did that land today with investigators who've been looking into this issue?
Well, David, the seeming indifference of the president to the Russians' hacking has left them stunned tonight. It's been more than a year and a half since the U.S. realized what the Russians were up to. And more troubling for them, they say, is the sense the Russians will be back for the 2018 and the 2020 elections with a vengeance. And so far, no sign the White House is doing anything to stop them, David.
Brian Ross with us tonight from New York. Brian, thank you. And overseas tonight from Iran, new and stunning images of the terror attack in Tehran. Surveillance showing people running for their lives, gunmen armed with pistols and rifles running after them.